Okay, I want to go through some of these competencies here. I'm going to revisit 2, and I'm going to do 5 and 6. All right, so let me go to my notebook, and I'm going to insert, whoops. Okay, so this one is going to be no identify if matrix is in a row echelon form. Okay. All right, so let me go back and I'm going to paste the conditions for row echelon form, which is right here, reduced row echelon form. Let's see if I can just, well, we'll do the snipping tool. All right, so let me just give an example. Okay, so let's see. Suppose I have something like this, 1, and I'm going to put a 0, 5, 3, 2. Okay, and then I'm going to have 0, 0, 1, 4, 7, and then I'll have 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay, so the question is this in row echelon form? Is this in reduced row echelon form? Okay, now you have to check these things. Leading ones in stair-step arrangement. There are leading ones in every row. So leading ones I have. Now stair-step means that each successive one is to the right of the previous one. So I have this kind of stair-step like this. Now that's true. Each one is to the right of the previous one. Okay. Now the other thing is that the pivot columns have only one non-zero entry. Here's a pivot column because it has a leading one. Here's a pivot column because it has a leading one. Here's a pivot column because it has a leading one. Now, this pivot column has all other entries 0, which is correct. This pivot column does not have all other entries 0. This here is not correct. Right? This 5 should be a 0. And this one also is not correct. This should be a 0. This should be a 0. Doesn't matter there's a 0 here. This could be a 0 or not. But here I have 3 pivot columns, and you have to make sure that each pivot column has non-zero and has 0 entries except for the pivot entry. All right, let's do another example. It's not letting me go down. I'm going to have to insert some space. Okay. Okay. All right. So the answer here was no. Okay. All right, now here's another example. So I'm going to give, here I'm going to put 0, 1, star, and let's see, star, star, I'll do that. And then here I'm going to have star, star, 1, star, star, and then here I'm going to have star, 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 1. Okay. Now my question is, which entries need to be 0 in order to have RREF? Okay. All right, now we do have our stair-step arrangement of ones. We just need to make sure that all of the all the entries in pivot columns other than the leading entry are zeros. So here's a pivot column. So that means that these entries would have to be 0 here. Here's a pivot column here, so these entries would also have to be 0. Right? Now, here's a pivot column here. These entries would also have to be 0. Now, what other entries would have to be 0? Well, let's write it over here. So I know that I have 0, 1. I know that this one has to be a 0. This one, so far, I don't know. This one has to, this one has to be 0. Oops. This one has to be 0. All right, next row. I know that this one has to be a 0, as I mentioned over here. This is a 1. This one I don't know yet. This one has to be a 0. On the third row, I know that these two have to be zeros. This one I don't know yet, and this is a 1. Okay. And I don't know these either. Okay. Now, what about these? Can I tell whether this entry has to be a 0? Well, not so far, because this is not a pivot column. There's not a leading 1. Okay. Can I tell whether any of these entries have to be 0? Now look, this one also has to be 0. Why is that? Because I need the 1 here to be the leading 1. So this one also would have to be 0, because this is the leading 1. I couldn't possibly have a non-zero entry here because I need my leading 1 to be to the right of this one. Okay, what about this one? This one I don't know because it's not a pivot column, right? Let's look at the last row. Can I tell what this one is? Well, my leading entry has to be over here somewhere. Okay, so this one has to be 0. Okay, and this one also, because this is my leading 1. Right, so this one would also have to be 0. Right. Now, how about these? Do these have to be 0? And the answer is no. Why? Because this is not a pivot column. All right. So here I have a reduced row echelon form matrix, and I don't know whether these are 0 or not, but it is reduced row echelon form. Now, I should mention that this is one alternative answer. There's another alternative answer. So this is alternative 1. The other alternative answer is I've assumed that this is a pivot column, but this one could also be a pivot column. So let's do an alternative answer. And then this alternative answer will say that the fourth column is a pivot column. All right, so here we have, let me rewrite it again. We had, our original one was 0, 1, star, star, star. And then here I had star, star, 1, star, star. And then here I had star, 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 1. Okay. All right, now, if the fourth column is a pivot column, that means that this entry here would have to be a 1. Now, if this entry here is a 1, then all of the entries before it would have to be a 0 because this is my pivot column. So I'd have to have 0, 0, 0 here. All right. I also have pivot columns here and here, so this would have to be 0, this would have to be 0. And this would also have to be a 0 because the leading 1 is here. Now, since this is a pivot column, these would also have to be zeros. So this is another alternative. This is also in reduced row echelon form. 1, 0, 0, x, 0, 0, 1, 0, star, 0, 0, 0, 1, star. Now this is also in reduced row echelon form. All right, let's do one more. So I'm going to say determine which entries of the following matrix must be 0 to give an RREF form. Okay, so let me give you a matrix. Oh, it disappeared. All right, we'll insert a space, and let's go back here to my here, and then let's try this. Here we have, I'm going to put a 0 and then a 1 here, and then we'll put, let's see, I'm going to put 3 stars, 1, 2, 3, and then here I'm going to put a 1 here, a 1 here, and a 0 here. Whoops, sorry, made a mistake. 1 here, 1 here. I got messed up. Okay, whoops, stop. Okay, all right, let's get it. Okay, not sure what's happening here. Sorry, all right, let's continue. So they're going to put a 1 here and a 0 here. And all the others, I don't know. Oops, not sure what that was. All right, it's acting a little squirrely, but we'll get there. All right, so there we have this, 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 this. Okay. All right, now which of these entries must be 0 in order to get REF form? Sorry, this is an asterisk. It looks kind of messy. That's an asterisk. Okay, so I'll put my answer in red, and all right, we certainly we have 0, 1. Okay, now it's clear that this must be a pivot column because it's a leading one in that row. There's no alternative. That must be the leading one in that row. So all of these must be zeros. Now if these are all zeros, these also have to be zeros. Otherwise I couldn't possibly get a stair-step arrangement. Right, now I've got a 1 here. This is a pivot column, so all of these have to be zeros. Okay. Now this one's also a pivot column. All of these have to be zeros. What about this one? Well, I have a 0 here. This one has no leading entries at all. These are all zeros. Okay. So what about this entry? Does this have to be a 0? And the answer is no. This is not a pivot column because it has no leading one. So this could be anything, anything, anything. All right. So this is in RREF form. Okay, so I'm going to stop here because this gives this competency, and you can practice this with some of the target exercises in the course outline.